Good morning. Selena Carpenter, Shield to Beast. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, for watching my videos. Got my little bunny in there. Hello, hello. So, uh, don't really too much worry about those notes. I really want to talk about the fact that, you know, we're consistently seeing that about every 9 to 10 years, there is an issue, there's a disease, there is a virus, there's a bacteria, there is a pathogen, or something that is being patented that has caused lives and cost a financial economic liability and hardship on citizens, because the system is just not cohesive. The system does not flow together. The system is so chaotic, it's so confusing, and whether the system realizes it or not, the way that this modern employee structure and the employers have created their system, because see, the government is not of invisible people, okay? These are not gods, these are not angels or anything like that. These are people or things we can touch, okay? Communicate with. Whether we're having an efficacy to communicate or not doesn't really matter. We are similar to the same species, right? If not the same species, right? Okay? So we have this government that wants to give itself authority over everything. And see, when laws first started, there was already so many things that they already knew were not in that constitution or covered, right, by the colonies. And so those things was pretty much supposed to be left up to the people to figure out reasonably, right? Not saying that, for every little petty thing and everything that the government is going to come by force and implement themselves in people's lives. Now with the digital movement and this whole technology thing, which was supposed to make business easier, more accessible, so that people, the citizens, the humans can benefit, we have found that these digital systems, software, apps, services, this whole digital public accommodation or failure of, it's just so obsolete and it's not working. I mean, we can continue to extract thoughts like equity works, right? You extract from assets that you build for yourself. You have a house, you need it for something, you can perhaps go and pull out a loan or a second mortgage on it, right? You have a car, perhaps you can use it as collateral. Extracting equity. So when you hear that word equity means that we have people, to their benefit and our ignorance, that is changing words. So we've been using words for thousands of years, right? And then language has changed, right? And we have adapted to and accepted the utilization of other languages and words, and we have accustomed to it. However, there is such a danger, and we already know that, especially as people that are labeled black. We know the dangers, the destruction, the annihilation, the extermination that follows. It does not matter how any other group feels. They don't have the evidence, they don't have the history to support them in this argument. This argument is not their argument, right? To each group of people have to have their own argument based upon their grievances or experiences with each other. In society right now, we're having a problem because everyone's trying to, as always, implement themselves, jump in front of the line, insert themselves in other people's issues. You have to give people the privacy and the space that they need to deal with their issues with other groups. They'll get around to dealing with their issues with you. Because don't think that there isn't issues that this group of people have to deal. Black people have to deal with issues with everyone. Everyone who's ever been labeled black, African descendant, or so-called African American, we know that Elon Musk is an African American. It's the most distorted term utilized in a derogatory nature for us. But for an individual in his likeness utilizing that term African American, he benefits. So when Elon Musk becomes an African American, right, and other people from South Africa is becoming African American, right, and then they come to America and then they are prejudiced or have these radicalized or extreme views of others, right? It has been a colonial practice that has been instituted since the Boers and Dutch migrated, immigrated, traveled across seas for the purpose to kill people, for the purpose to steal land, for the purpose to occupy the space. So it doesn't really matter what type of words that we are using, right? Until those words begin to have an effect on us. And so if a word is having an effect on me by your force, then I have the right to say something about it, and I should challenge it. You know, as an American, we are taught a part of being in a democratic society is that you have these rights that you're supposed to be able to exercise. And whenever there is a structure, employees and employer, that is interfering, judiciaries that are interfering in the procedure of law, then they are violating the law under the color of law. But see, because these new people in the past 60-something years have decided, after they behind the closed door meeting, after murdering our civil rights leaders, dismissed the Civil Rights Act in regards to us coloreds. And all the hundreds of years of fighting and deaths we sustained and survived. See, grief is real. There's nothing that can compare to such a feeling. And no one really has control over making your circumstances of grief better for you once you are grieving. So, so why would we have a system of employees or employers that are causing grief? We have a system that is supposed to redress people around, but we elect not to. Once placed in those positions as authority, which means competently they are abusers of their authority. But when these people are friends, when they are colleagues, when they are in a conspiracy against another or others, then in their microaggressive nature, every time we are confronting them or bringing our grievances to them, they dismiss them, and they are jesting practices without redressing us, implementing our causes of actions, grievances without us, but for others, to ensure, oh, this is brilliant, this is a great idea. Let's ensure that others in this situation are labeled, subjected to things in their mind, in their interpretation, that they can benefit. And thereby we see this created reverse discrimination. Reverse discrimination just means that a white person has decided in a situation that they are going to utilize any instance in their cultural misunderstanding to see or say that mostly it's going to be a white woman, that a black male or a black woman is being an aggressor or being sexually harassful to them. That's their number one thing. It's historical, and it should be in the books as a malignant practice and a public health crisis. Okay? We have too many of them when there are better women, better men that can be in position of leadership that actually could be leading people. We could have less deaths. Men on the streets and young boys could understand that they have to listen, that there actually would be a consequence. People are not afraid of getting in a cage when they feel like they've been in a cage their whole life. You treat them like an animal. So unconsciously, they're living less free than the animals that they're around on a daily basis, decades past. And it becomes an unconscious conditioning. Hence, the slave syndrome that has never been treated or therapied, ever. Because the white man, European colonist, does not want to acknowledge the harm, the grief, the Holocaust, the extermination, the annihilation of thousands and thousands of tribal nations, which is inclusive, not limited to millions of lives on land and sea. And so words are important to us. We need to understand what you're saying. We need to know that you mean the same thing that we mean. For instance, I don't like to claim white. I don't put that anywhere. But if I start a job and it's a government job, I'm going to have to disclose the truth, which means I would have to disclose that, from which creates other issues. And hence we have this system that forces itself on us, and even decades later will ask us questions about our personal lives, where we live, where we've been, what we purchased, who we've been with, who do we love. All of these very intrusive private things. Really, that it has no benefit to no one to know. These are just things that an intruder, a person who is suffering from a master's complex, a malignant master narcissistic complex, always need to get, always needs to feel entitled, always need to be privy. That has to stop. And the free travel of immigration to the United States also needs to stop. We have more than enough immigrants here in the past 600 years. This influx needs to stop because you were given permission to come here and then you took advantage of it. Okay? And then in your own language and in your own effect and in your own interests, which is evidenced by all historical books you have, by your congressional records, your first continental congressional records, your Federalist Papers, your constitutions. We have federal and states, and each state have all these corrupt laws, and they're allowing black people to be murdered in streets and show it. We broadcast it on TV. That's caricature. They put that on postcards. They lynch people and put it on newspaper covers. They took the circus away so that people in our communities can't even, metropolitan areas can't even have the opportunity of seeing real animals live. Having that experience, and replace it with the hip-hop culture and the stage. Whereas they didn't want us in Hollywood before, or didn't want to give us any parts. They figured out a way how to still entertain themselves and put us on magazine covers, posters, bulletins, and everything and everywhere else we'd allow it. Voluntarily. There's this thing called voluntary consent, hence why you need to know words. There's no legitimacy if the original words are no longer in effect for this European structure. You can no longer continue to allow racist, discriminatory people on this land when we are all speaking the same language. We can speak for ourselves. We don't need to represent us. You have always failed to represent us. You do not have any interest of ours. In any instance, we are in a cultural conflict at all times. We speak the same slave English and still have an inefficacy to communicating in all instances. We have a white woman trying to translate or narrate our experiences, which is discriminatory. It is racist. Racism is the worst crime to be committed against the labeled and so-called blacks, which are the lost tribes. The Americas or anywhere, we are the ones XX. Okay? In every instance. Not for 5 years, but for over 500 and 600 years. Since we have befriended and encountered the new African American. So I say, to start to evaluate, we must challenge the system. Start to call legislature. Start to call these candidates. They do cold calling. They all knock on your door. They want to vote from us. But they're never representing us. They have changed even the parties in their own interests. They were not a Republic or a Democratic. These are a peasant people and a squalor as pirates that has created this whole fantasized, romanticized history for themselves in the past 500 years. Refusing to speak about anything of the previous 500 years. Hence, obviously, why. We don't want to keep arguing with your generation children with a lesser intellect than us. We don't want to keep having the same argument, but you're saying that something doesn't exist, but you keep subjecting us and our generations to your hateful behavior, your jealous, envious behavior. I know that I'm a naturally attractive woman. I have no makeup on. I know that I am 42, but I look younger than you. I know that. I know that your expectations of me have been defied. I know that I am more intelligent than you expected, and I have maintained a multi-dimensional competence in a various different areas. And the most dangerous thing about a forceful people, educating, teaching, being a part of the nurturing process of impressionable youth and children and babies, is that behavior becomes theirs. And so everything you face in society are facing from these people interfering in your lives, depriving you from anything, unless you, yes sir, ma'am, sir, them. Your children even have been weaponized against you, in the sense where their behavior is also uncontainable, in the sense where they are so challenging and defiant, in the sense where they are questioning you when you're giving them an order, when it is so debilitating that you can't work away from home or at home. And we have a system that is laundering funding out to create corporations that create jobs for the very people that are racist and discriminatory toward these people labeled blacks in these urban and metropolitan areas. And these conversations need to be had. We need good immigrants. We have always gotten the worst, and someone has to say it. This country and every other country, through colonialism, has murdered the best of the best tribes and kidnapped the best of the best tribes and made them live in a squalor as an enslaved people. Not as their own separate nations, but as displaced, enslaved, trafficked people. No different than the interpretation of us interpreting those in the industry, those children or whomever, being sex trafficked. It's the same thing as sex trafficking. As so much breeding occurred. It's the worst form of sex trafficking, because we don't see that breeding, that buck breaking occurring in our modern day sexual trafficking system. We have all of these federal agencies, but not one protects the interests of the citizens. We have to consider that. Not one is there to protect the interests of Native American citizens that are not on those reservations. We must consider that. They have taught their generations and their children to hate us and to not see us, to treat us as if we are invincible. And so I say treat them as if they are invincible. And take all of our entertaining and our circus acts to our own lands and charge people for access. Create our own forces, our own educational systems. Everything that we work so hard to do, have accomplished, and they have inserted themselves so that they can benefit. And now we have their next generations jumping back in the front of the line, talking about how they don't want to be left out. There are millions of Ku Klux Klan members still actively engaging in the United States. There are thousands of corporations in the United States that are Ku Klux Klan led and organized and funded, even called nonprofits. None of that information is disclosed to the public or to the black nations who should know, because we should have the right to decide who we want to do business with. Not being forced to pay 80% of whatever we bring in or 200% of whatever we bring in every year to the United States Treasury Department of the Social Security Administration. That 10% tax displaced on every household with a colored woman in it. You white women don't need to know. You don't need to be privy to our history. But you don't stand in the front of me and tell me because you don't see it or want to deal with it that I don't have to deal with it. I don't have the right to deal with it. And I can't see what I see with my own eyes. I cannot hear what I'm hearing with my own eyes. You don't have the right to do that. I heard the ADL talking about how they had so many rights. You've gotten those rights from the crusade of the so-called blacks, the Native American tribes. You have accustomed to your Jewishism and benefited and propagated your victimology on everyone internationally that you can. And someone needs to tell the truth, because black people have never woke up one day and decided we were going to get pissed the fuck off as nations, as a unit. We are going to grieve as a nation, as a unit. We have the right to do that. We have the right to grieve as nations. We are not one nation. We are not black. I'm not black-skinned. You must be colorblind. And I'm tired of playing that game with people as well. It is a social construct. So for the purposes of being amongst my people, and that black powerness that evolved from the 60s that also was destroyed, and so the generation's lack of knowledge of really understanding what that design of blackness was, it was a promotional tool. It was the nations taking something, seeing something to unify in. But it was the same thing that placed us in extermination. And so when we had people crying for 5 years of having to live in a squalor, having to live in buildings together, having to live in encampments, being burned alive, even starving to death, they also were stealing off of each other's bodies. They also were being hateful to one another there. They also were there hurting and harming one another. And that's all the things that they don't want nobody to know. You don't have the right to hide our history. And you don't have a right to lie to Americans to live off of us any longer. Germany is across the sea. We have planes. You don't have to take the Transylvania anymore. You don't have to ship yourselves in over the water, over those harsh conditions. Now you hold registration papers and can prove who you are as you travel and who you belong to domestically. And go back home. And then you can apply all your grievances to Germany, because they've made lots of money off of cars. They made a substantial amount of money off the Holocaust. And a lot of Holocaust survivors not only made money and benefited from all of the donations and all of the charity of everyone, international charity, that those labeled black never received. Okay? So in the narcissistic nature, we see that a group of people will find or place themselves, acculturate themselves in any condition, even as a Native American, to benefit Homestead Act. So it is time that we segregate in a sense where you European colonists, you use your money and your interests, yes, for your own prosperity. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what you don't get to do is making delusional decisions about my womb that you know nothing about. You have no competence. You are a derelict in duty, and it's proven. There is millions of pages of evidence in the last two presidencies and the one previous to the other that proves you are not ever, as a group of people, going to be able to cohabitate in a peaceful nature as a warmongering